Hello everyone, thanks for joining us at commsHERO Week. Most of you won't know me, but my name's Kate Stanley-Forth and I'm actually the newest member of the commsHERO team. Today I'm joined by Spencer Waldron, who is the Global Communications Director of Prezi, who is also one of our event sponsors. Spencer has spent most of the past decade helping people organise and craft, design and deliver great presentations with confidence. This session is about how to make your content more engaging, whether that is presenting your big ideas to a board of directors or sharing internal comms amongst your colleagues. Get ready to learn the framework you can use to create engaging content time and time again. Don't forget to use the emojis below, and if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A tab to the right of your screen. Finally, if you would like to add subtitles to this session, just click the CC button below and they'll come up for you. Right, I'm going to pass this over to Spencer now.
Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here. Okay, so the hybrid office is upon us, and it doesn't really matter if you and I go back to the office full time. It's pretty kind of sure now that every meeting that we'll have moving forward will have at least one person dialing in remote. So the question is, how do we present and communicate and share content in this little window in a way that's really good? And that's what I want to focus on today. And I'm going to do that using two filters or two pillars, which is attention and engagement, because I think they're the big ones. So how do we get somebody's attention in the first place? And then when we've got it, how do we foster engagement? So let's start with attention. Now, before we talk about attention, we have to kind of bust a myth. And that myth is that our attention spans have got really, really short. It's just not true. Now, how do I know this? Well, I'm willing to bet quite a bit of money that at some point in recent times, you've seen this appear on your screen. It's okay, you can admit it. I've seen it as well. Now, for those of you who don't have Netflix, this is what Netflix shows you when, well, we've been watching too much Netflix, hours worth. And if you don't have Netflix, ask yourself the question, how is it that I can watch a movie for 2 hours and not move a muscle? What's going on there? Because that shows us it's entirely possible to hold somebody's attention for a long time. Well, it turns out that Hollywood figured out something much quicker than everybody else. And I am going to call James Bond to the stage to help us understand what that is and how we can apply it to our virtual presentations. And hey, let's face it, I've always wanted to be in a James Bond movie, and now I can, thanks to the power of Prezi Video. But all joking aside, we are going to learn from James Bond what's going on here. So as a labor of love, I trawled through countless hours of James Bond movies, and I found two identical scenes. So it's both James Bond movies, it's both a car chase, and both the car chases are in a construction site. The big difference, these two movies are decades apart. So the one on the right is from 1962, Dr. No, and the one on the left is Quantum of Solace, 2008. So I'm going to play the video. They're going to run simultaneously, and I want you to look and see if you can spot what's the differences. Same movie, same character, same scene, just decades apart. So let's play the video and let's see what you can see. Now, there's no audio because it would be too much the two together, but have a look and see what you think. Now, what you should start to pick up on, if you look here in Dr. No, is that actually the scene lengths are pretty long, 10, 15, 20 seconds long. And remember, back then, this was a cutting edge action movie. Whereas if you look here, on Quantum of Solace, the scene lengths are maybe 1 or 2 seconds, and then it does what's called a jump cut to another camera angle. And when that jump cut happens, it spikes dopamine in our brain, and we want to pay attention. Now, the other thing you see here when you look at Sean Connery is that the camera is on a fixed angle. It's bolted to the front of the car. Whereas here, when we're with Daniel Craig, it feels like somebody just threw the camera in the car and it's rolling around. It's not a fixed camera angle, it's a moving camera. And that movement, that shakiness, also spikes dopamine in our brain and makes us pay attention even more. So what we see is these two things, jump cuts and moving camera angle, are almost mimicking what happens when we look at our mobile phones, when we're looking at the newsfeed. Is that, oh, what's this? Oh, what's this? Every time it spikes little bits of dopamine. So what we can learn from Hollywood, what they figured out quicker than everybody else, is that movement is the gateway to attention. And we can definitely take this idea of movement and apply it to when we're communicating in this virtual box that we find ourselves in. So there's a few things that we can do. And the first thing is to change the format often. Gone are the days when I can just put up a piece of content, especially if I'm doing it like this, where you don't see me. It's going to be hard for you to pay attention. So what we have to do is make sure that we keep changing the format, switch between you talking, between a video, between images. If it's like a team presentation, then make sure other people are doing the presentation as well. So change the format often. The next is this idea of, in the virtual setting, is trying to get away from screen sharing our slides. Because when we do this, this is when I lose you as an audience, because there's no movement. So what we have to do, and obviously I'm using Prezi Video to help me bring the content onto the screen, but is to make sure you and your content are on the screen together. The next thing is movement. So how can we have movement of your visuals and graphics? Well, again, obviously I'm using Prezi Video, so I can do like big movements like this. And these movements also help spike attention, but I can also use things like GIFs, because this little movement also keeps you looking at the screen and paying attention. Now, yes, I want the GIF to underline a point, and what I don't want is too much exaggerated movement. If it's too much movement, then it can get distracting, but subtle movement can be really powerful. Now, I can use subtle movement in different ways, because, for example, this is the next point that I want to talk about in terms of movement, but I can do something like this, where I do just a little movement, and this also is a little spike of dopamine. So that's movement of graphics, changing the format often, using things like GIFs. But equally, or even more important, is you as the presenter. So this is a study that was done last year by the American Psychological Association. And they did a study based around, obviously, all of the schools had to do distance learning. And what they did is they looked at lots of classes of students and the teachers. And some of the teachers had the video switched on when they did the distance learning, and some teachers had the video switched off. And I'm sure you can see where this is going. But what they found was the teachers that had the video switched on, they got much, much higher levels of attention and retention. And what it shows us is that we take a lot of social cues from people's faces. There's a lot of movement in people's faces, in the eye, in the mouth, in the hands. And what this helps us understand is, if we want to get attention in our presentation, it's about faces and things that move. These are the two things that we have to make sure we have a lot of when we're doing our virtual presentation or virtual meetings. So that's a little kind of snippet into how we can start getting attention. So what do we do now we have some attention? How do we start to kind of really engage people and keep them interested? Well, for this time, I'm going to call upon Aristotle, of all people. Now, Aristotle, even 2,500 years ago, wrote a body of work called The Three Modes of Persuasion. And pretty much anything, when you look at modern day theory about communication, kind of comes back to this guy. Now, he wrote this 3 modes of persuasion. You'll have definitely heard them before, the ethos, logos, pathos. Now, what we've done at Prezi is translate that into today's world. So we took that idea of how you can persuade somebody and applied it to the virtual meeting. And we call it the virtual presentation framework. So let me just zoom this in a bit. Now, what you can see here is there's three main pillars: credibility, trust, and emotion. And, this is the ethos, pathos, logos. And what we've done, if you look at the credibility ring there, you can see all of the things that we've been quietly obsessed about in the last year. Things like camera, lighting, microphone, what am I wearing, what's going on behind me. And what we're seeing now is these things have kind of become table stakes for credibility. If you want to show up and have your message received with credibility, things like that are now table stakes, in addition to all of the more traditional things like slide design, confidence, did you rehearse, did you practice, all these kind of things. The other two rings are trust and emotion, the building blocks of how people make a decision. First, I need to emotionally connect to something using ancient unconscious parts of my brain. And then my cerebral cortex, my modern brain, does the rationalization. Can I trust what this person says? What proof do I have? What evidence do I have? So trust is normally we use things like data and charts and statistics and research and case studies. And emotion is more about things like storytelling, narrative structure, metaphors, rhetoric, all these kind of things. Now, what I can't do is go through everything on this framework. We would need a whole day, not the short time that we have with each other today. But what I did want to do is just pick out a few things that I think can really help you when you're doing your next meeting or your next presentation. So the first one is a bit of a traditional one, but I think it's important, and that's slide design. And this is where I have to break some bad news, some terrible news to everybody. And that's that bullet points do not rock. I'm sorry. And it's very symptomatic of we're all busy. And what a lot of us do is we'll open up the laptop, go into our presentation software of choice and start typing away. And there's such an easy fix for this, which will really subtly add to your credibility. Because when people see lots and lots of bullet points, that's when we remember all of the worst presentations we've ever seen. It erodes at our credibility. So what we can do is literally replace it with something as simple as a square and a rectangle and put the point in. 5 minutes to do, looks a lot better, forces us to self-edit because then we just put less text in and allows us to use that as a visual clue as to what I was going to talk about. So bullets is one thing. The next is images. Images are super powerful when it comes to credibility. Now, if I just go into my image library of choice and I type in the word meeting, this is pretty much what I'll start to see. And I don't know about you, but I've never done that in 25 plus years of working in offices. So what do we do about it? Well, what we want to do is get images that help us. And we can still go to our image library of choice and we type in the word meeting, but afterwards we type in the word authentic. So when we use authentic as a search string, when we're looking for images, I start to get images that look a lot more like the kind of meetings that I'm in every day. And what this does very subtly, but don't underestimate the power, it will lend credibility to the message that you're giving out to the world. So think about how you can find authentic images. You can still have fun with it. You know, who hasn't had somebody's pet, for example, make a cameo appearance when we're given some kind of virtual meeting? So you can be tongue-in-cheek, you can be, have fun with it, but but authentic is what we're trying to get across. So again, two very short, easy, quick things when it comes to visually what we're showing on the screen to help us build credibility in that credibility ring. So the next one is a big one. I think this is something that has a huge impact on everything we do, not just credibility, but is confidence. Because everybody on this call, all of the speakers at this conference, including myself, we all have nerves and fears and imposter syndrome when we have to stand up and give a presentation. It's just that some people find a way to manage those fears. And the reason that we're all the same is because we're dealing with biology. So emotions and feelings are two different things. Emotions, there's only 6 of them. Fear is one of the 6. So what happens when we're scared? Well, heart beats faster, breath gets faster, sweaty palms, mouth goes dry. That's actually an emotion, and it happens in our unconscious brain structures, places like the amygdala and the cerebellum. And our cerebral cortex, our modern brain, the brain that you're using right now to listen to me, interprets what's happening at a physical level and goes, this is not good, let's not do this. So we all have what I call this inner voice, which is our biology. It's our subconscious body. And it's always whispering to me, Spencer, who are you to say this? These people in the room are more experienced than you. What about other people think something different? It's all these things that happen to us. It's this inner voice that's always whispering at us to maybe not do this. But again, it's reminding ourselves that it's biology, it's the fight, flight, or freeze tendency, warning us maybe this isn't a good idea. So what we need to do is find a way to say goodbye to that voice, to manage it better. So how can we do it? Well, again, I could talk for a day and a half on this topic, but I wanted to pick out just a couple of things that I think are really powerful. So the first is something that you can use really in the moment, in those 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes before you stand up and talk in a meeting or do a presentation. And that's having a mantra or a motto. Now, I found my motto quite by accident a very long time ago, more than 20 years. So this is a picture of me backpacking in India more than 20 years ago. And before I left on that trip, my inner demon voice, my biology, my fight, flight, or freeze was really working hard at telling me not to go. Like, what are you doing? You've quit your job. You have hardly any money. You're obviously going to get lost. You're going to get ill. You're probably going to die. Why would you do such a thing? And this got louder and louder and louder up until the point where I got onto the plane. And of course, what I discovered when I actually got there and started traveling, it was nowhere near as bad as what my imagination or my biology had made me think. And what I found over the course, I actually traveled for 2 years. And what I found time and time again, that this was always, always true. And it kind of became like this unofficial motto with me, that when I was about to do something that I thought was scary, I would say, Spencer, you know, you make it much harder to think about than what it actually is when you do it. And this became my mantra. And if we fast forward 10, 15 years after this photo was taken to London, when I was about to stand up on a stage at a marketing conference and talk in front of 200 people for the first time, and I was behind the stage 10 minutes before, trying not to be sick in a bin, this is what I was telling myself. Like, Spencer, you know, it's just your imagination. It's your brain making things worse. And that's what helped me control that situation and do it again and again and again and again. So what's your motto? What's the word or the sentence that you can use? Many people have this. If you see interviews from athletes, they all have one. So what's the sentence that's going to get you through that moment? So the second thing I want to talk about is, how do we deal with fears in general? So let's imagine for a second that I have a fear of, I don't know, say spiders. Well, luckily I don't have a fear of spiders. I can even let this go all over my face and it's okay. But if I had a fear of spiders, what I would do is I would read about spiders, I would watch videos of spiders, and I would build up until the point where I can maybe hold one in my hand, and it would get easier and easier and easier. And that's kind of what I did with my fear. And I had a crippling fear when I was a young boy and a teenager of wasps. And this is still difficult for me to have on the screen. I actually have a feeling inside when this is on my shoulder here, as opposed to the spider, which didn't bother me at all. But I'm a lot better at this now, because I had to force myself to let wasps be around me without jumping upending the table and running out of the room. And gradually, bit by bit, it got easier and easier and easier. Now, what about if you have a fear of heights? Well, it's kind of the same thing, right? You've got to go to the top of a building and look down from the top and get used to it. You start lower and you build up and build up and build up. So I'm sure you can see where this is going, but if we want to try and conquer our fear of public speaking, of being on camera in a virtual setting, we just have to do more and more of this. Find as many opportunities as you can to stand up in front of people, to speak up in a meeting, to do video calls, present in video calls, because it's hands down the best way to grow your confidence, but it takes time. It's not an overnight fix, but really, really the most powerful thing that you can do. You gradually get more and more used to it. I used to, back in the early days, I would go to every meetup I could find. I didn't care if it was 2 people, a dog and a pizza box. I would stand up and give a presentation because I knew I was learning all the time. So 2 things on confidence to kind of close our little look into the credibility ring on the virtual presentation framework. So let's move down. Let's go to trust. So trust is all about data, statistics, charts, things we have to use a lot when we want to prove to somebody that this is a good idea. Well, when you think about it, when we show data, what we're really trying to do is build this bridge between you as the presenter and your audience. And for me, when we show data, there's 3 jobs that we need to do if we want to build that bridge of trust. Now, the first is we have to use the right data to begin with. And the right data is not just saying, okay, here's a piece of data that proves what I say or what I want you to think, because we can all do that. But if somebody can find an opposing piece of data that tells a totally different story, then that's going to erode the trust that we have. So we need statistically relevant data. We need data from trustworthy sources. We need to show that we've looked at multiple data points. So this is a really, really important building block. But then comes, we're going to show somebody the data. And what we normally do is we go, and we put our chart up on the screen. And what happens at that point is people stop listening to you as a presenter, because now they're looking at the chart and they're trying to figure out, what on earth does this tell me? So our next job is to reveal the meaning of the data. We have to make it easy for our audience to understand, what does this data show us? And we can do that using something called signposting and data storytelling. These 2 things are really powerful for this, and I'll show you something in a minute. And the third and final piece of building this bridge is, now people understand the data, they understand the meaning of it. The final bit is we need to show, what can you do with this data? What's the actionable insights that this data brings? These 3 things start to be really powerful. So let's look at an example. So here's a chart. Let me take away my camera feed for a second. Hang on, it's not going. There we go. So when I put this chart up on the screen, you stop listening to me and you're looking at the chart. And I'm willing to bet quite a lot of money that your eye was drawn to the yellow line. Let me bring the camera back. So this is called signposting. You know, I picked a bright color, yellow, of what I wanted you to look at in this chart, and all of the other stuff, all of the other data points, I turned to gray because I didn't want you to look at them. And what that did in a nanosecond is you looked at that and you went, oh, that's that nice hockey stick chart that goes up and to the right that all finance people love. And you were then looking to me as the presenter to fill in the detail. Now, I'm using Prezi Video, so I get to be inside my chart, which I absolutely love. And I can start pointing to stuff and saying, okay, salesperson B, you know, at this particular moment in time, did these things, and I can start doing data storytelling. You know, this is how they increased the budget. They fought for it. They got the right people in place, did this strategy, and look what happened. And then maybe we can apply that to everybody else. So you can really start to bring data alive. You've got the right data in the first place. You signpost it, reveal the meaning, do data storytelling, and it really helps people rationally think, okay, this is a good idea. So let's look at another example of how we can use data storytelling to reveal the meaning. So you may remember a few years ago, I think it was back in 2008, 2009, I forget the year now. And there was a volcano in Iceland and I'm not going to try and say its name, it's about 38 letters long, but there was an Icelandic volcano, a volcano in Iceland that erupted, and the ash cloud started to go across the whole of Europe, and it caused loads of chaos. And there were stories in the media that started to come out to say this volcano is really bad for the environment because it's pumped out 150,000 tons of CO2 into the atmosphere with this ash cloud that was going. Now, there was a group of data journalists and data scientists at the Guardian newspaper in the UK. And what they did is they looked at it and went, okay, so what other data points are there around this event? And they suddenly realized, yeah, so there was lots of aeroplanes that would have been flying, but they'd been grounded because of the ash cloud that was going across Europe. So how much CO2 would those airplanes have put out? Because they put CO2 out. And I'm sure you can guess where this is going as well. You're right. The airplanes would have put out much more CO2 than the volcano. So the real story was not that the volcano was bad for the environment. It was actually the world's first carbon neutral volcano. I love this story because it demonstrates having multiple data points to show the real story. It shows signposting. It shows how you can do data storytelling and bring it all to life in a virtual setting using something like Prezi Video. So that's data. Many, many things that we can talk about it, but the idea is those three things: write data, reveal the meaning, show the actionable insights. Okay, so now to my favorite part of the framework, emotion. How can we emotionally connect? How can we stir emotion in somebody for the final piece of how we make a persuasive presentation? Now here, I would normally start talking about storytelling and narrative structure and rhetoric and metaphors and things like that. And I think there's lots of people talking about this, even though it's a passion of mine for years. So I'm going to pick a couple of things that I think are hyper relevant to this virtual little box that we find ourselves in that will help us on the emotion part of the framework. Now, for this, I want to talk about emotional connection, and I'm going to call upon, of all people, Winston Churchill this time. And Winston Churchill, love him or hate him, had this amazing quote about if you want to inspire people with emotion, you have to be swamped with emotion yourself. If you want to move somebody to tears, your own tears need to fall first. And if you want to convince somebody, then you yourself must believe. Now, what I love about this is I kind of have to see you to do that. You have to see me. You have to see the passion in my face, you know, not just my voice. You need to see how my face lights up or I smile or whatever when I'm talking about whatever it is that I'm talking about. And if we go back to Hollywood for a moment, and I'll play you this, let me stop the volume. This, by all standards, is probably still the saddest movie of all time, I think, officially, The Champ. But I put it there to make you think about when you watch a movie or you watch something on Netflix, what's the moment where maybe your tears start to well up or your heart's beating faster or you're overcome with emotion? It's normally when we see the protagonist, the hero, the main character going through something emotional. We mirror what's happening. We take that emotion and we can't help it. It's human. We respond to it. So this is why it's important to have the camera on, why it's important not to hide behind a slide, and why we should show our passion. And that is about doing presentations, practicing, getting more confident and showing your true self when you're doing that kind of presentation. So that's emotional connection. I think the other thing that we're just beginning to see kind of become more and more important now we're a year and a half, 2 years into what's been happening is how do we make sure that we have better audience interaction when we have our meetings at work, whether it's a team meeting, all hands meeting for the whole company, whatever it is. Because yes, it may just be the presenter that's talking, but we also need feedback from the audience. And what we need to ensure is diversity of voice, because what normally happens is you think about any of your regular meetings, there's always what I call the usual suspects, the people that will always put their hands up and they will say their piece, they will have an opinion. Now, that's great because maybe they're more confident, but the most confident people in the room are not always the people with the most value. What we need to be sure is to get that kind of voice or ideas or contribution from as many people as possible. Now, we have one extra barrier when we're in the virtual world that we didn't have when we're in a physical room, and it's this, the mute button. Because now, you think about it, it takes courage to put your hand up and contribute something in a meeting. And before, we would kind of like, I have an idea, or I've got something important to say. And you would kind of start to gesticulate that, yes, I'm going to talk. And when somebody stops talking, then you jump in. Whereas now we have to do all that, but we have to find a time where we can unmute the mute button and jump in. And that's not easy. That adds an extra barrier, especially if we're not as confident as a person, or not confident because of the situation or the people in the room. So this is something we've been really focused on a lot with Prezi Video at the moment, and trying to find ways that we can give people the way to kind of like visually communicate as an audience member, not just as a presenter. So here's me doing my chart thing. Now, what normally happens in a meeting, and this is what it will look like, is somebody's doing the presentation and people are, not wanting to unmute and disturb what's happening, but maybe they want to contribute something. So one of the things that we've developed now is this ability that you can just bring any kind of visual asset onto the screen live in a call. A GIF, an emoji, you can type text and it appears on the screen. So again, what this does is give people a way to visually contribute to the conversation without having to do this unmute button. I've used this a lot for things like, I don't want to interrupt anything, but I want to say +1, so I can put +1 up on the screen. Or I need to go answer the door, so I do BRB, be right back, and just bring it full screen and then go. So think about ways that you can get people to contribute to the meeting visually, but also as a meeting facilitator or a meeting leader, make sure that we're coaxing out important contributions and information from as many people as we can in the room. So we're getting close to the end. That's a kind of like an intro to the virtual presentation framework and those 3 core pillars of making a persuasive presentation or piece of communication: credibility, trust, and emotion. So before we get to the end, I thought I would give you one more thing that has helped me an enormous amount in the last few years, probably 12 years now. This is how long I've been doing the whole communication thing. But and for me, it's kind of like the missing puzzle or the missing piece of the puzzle in terms of, okay, we start to understand more about how we can make a more persuasive presentation, but how do we decide what we're going to put in it? How do we decide what words we're going to say in a meeting? Well, I've used a lot something called the Think Do Matrix. It was created by a guy called Andrew Abella a long time ago. Amazing guy, real big thought leader in the presentation space. And it's pretty simple. You fill in the 4 boxes. What does my audience think now before I've put my hand up and spoken? Or what does my audience think now before I've given my presentation? And what do I want them to think afterwards? What's that change that I want to make happen? And do is, okay, what action are they doing? Or what action are they not taking at the moment? And what action do I want them to do after I've spoken, after I've given my presentation? Now, because I'm obsessed with storytelling, emotional connection, and things like that, I quite cheekily, sorry, Andrew, I added an extra row to this, which is the feel. How does my audience feel about something that, or how does my audience feel about this topic I'm going to talk about? And how do I want them to feel afterwards? Because this is how we start to make an emotional connection. These are more rational. These are more on the trust area. Once I filled that out, now you can use this. You can do it 15 minutes before you go into a meeting. You can just jot down, this is what I want to try and do in this meeting. Or you can use it as a filter for every single piece of content that I'm going to put in a presentation. Because if it doesn't help make that change happen, there's probably a good reason that it doesn't need to be in the presentation at all. So again, really powerful. I've used this loads over the years. So before we get into Q&A in a minute, as a bit of a summary, remember, maximize movement. Movement is the gateway to attention. Movement of our faces, movement of our content. This is what will help us kind of build that attention. Find ways of not doing this too much, because the second people can't see you or there's not a lot of stuff happening on the screen, then it starts to get incredibly hard to keep that attention, and find ways of fostering that two-way communication. So I hope you found this useful. If you want to find more about Prezi Video and how to use it, just go to prezi.com. And if you want to invest in yourself and learn more about being confident in terms of public speaking, then hop over to my website, The Confident Presenter. I have a whole ton of stuff there. And because you're Comms Heroes, I'll even give you 30% off as a coupon code. So I hope you found that useful, and I'm excited to get into some Q&A.
Hello, thank you for that. That was amazing. First question that we've got is from Danielle Taylor. Just a little quick cheeky question. Is Prezi Video a free resource? I think everyone's just really inspired by that presentation. Super jealous of that.
So yeah, Prezi at its heart is a freemium product. So you can use a free version of Prezi Video to get started. And eventually, as you start to get to know it, you'll hit paywalls for various features. So you can get started for free. You can even just import your PowerPoint slides and they'll be here next to you. So lots of options.
Cool, thank you. And this is just something that we've been talking about while your presentation has been on at commsHERO HQ. Did you ever see the UK government COVID-19 briefings by any chance?
Some of them, yeah, one or two.
Have you heard about the famous next slide, please?
No.
Oh, have you not?
Okay.
No, we were just saying. Oh, never mind then, because we were just saying one of the ministers, there you go, next slide, please. He didn't have a clicker throughout the presentation, so it was just like a really dull presentation. All of a sudden, he would just go, "Next slide, please."
Next slide.
We were going to say, how do you avoid that? But obviously, you just get a clicker, really, don't you?
Yeah. I think I was listening to the tail end of the presenter before me, and she was talking about the importance of doing the tech check and making sure everything's okay. And a funny story that I have about the presentation remote. I was at a conference a few years ago where there was like multiple tracks running at the same time, and there's a person who's the presenter before me, and he's pressing the clicker and nothing's happening, and he's like clicking, and all of a sudden they suddenly realized that the two rooms had switched the clickers over, because suddenly his presentation started moving really quickly and it was the person in the next room. So you never know. There's always problems that can arise. Always.
And we've got a question here from Lee, actually. And he said, when it comes to confidence, do you believe in power poses? #Superman.
I think you find whatever works for you. I think a lot of this is really personal. I am a big believer in standing up when I'm presenting. I think when I'm standing, it gives me a different energy. It makes me feel a little bit the same as if I stand on a stage. So I think that's definitely something that I would advocate for. The other thing and this is maybe a personal thing, but I have what I call like certain clothes give me confidence. So if I wear a certain item of clothing, which, it gives you the spirit of having a superhero cape, but it could be a jacket, a shirt, a lucky whatever. But I'm also a big believer in it's almost like these little rituals that make you prepare for it. So I definitely think you need to find ways and rituals and things that make you feel confident, because I think it's slightly different for everybody. But yeah, power poses, if they work. I know a lot of people that will make themselves feel bigger before they go on. It gives them that feeling, or some people it's more about doing a certain saying to themselves or voice warming exercises. So yeah, I think find what works for you.
Fabulous. I mean, it's like in boxing, isn't it? When before they go out to box, they put on their song and it bigs them up and it gives them all the confidence.
Yes, exactly.
Then we've got a question from Anna Wanacott from North Devon Homes. She said, are you able to present on Prezi for someone else on the screen/video for, let's say, a tech or executive team?
Yes, it's possible. What you would do is have, we do this a lot as a team. So you could have, I'll give you a couple of examples. So you could have like a presentation where you're going to have multiple people presenting it, and you all have the presentation on the screen. And you saw what I could do where I can, let me go back to my Prezi. So I can very easily just kind of remove the camera feed, or I can remove the content. So I can have my presentation. Okay, this is my part in the presentation, and I just remove the presentation feed. And then when, I don't know, somebody says, and now I'm going to hand it over to Spencer to talk about X, then I literally just press, we have like hotkeys on the keyboard, 1, 2, and 3. So I just press 2 on the keyboard, the visuals come up, the other person gets rid of it, and then I continue the presentation. Or you can obviously do it in a way that, you can have the presentation on screen and do that for somebody else, but that's a little bit more tricky. But it's if I have a spotlight clicker, which I can keep out of sight for the most part, and it's really easy to navigate.
Great. And obviously this works super well on a virtual platform. How would this reflect on on in-person events? Can it be used or to feature as an engaging presentation, or is it only really for virtual that it'll work?
That's a really, really good question, because it kind of starts to overlap onto lots of different things. So if you're going to be in an in-person event and there is no virtual element to it, there's nobody joining remote, then I wouldn't use Prezi Video. I would use the normal Prezi Present, it's called. And then you're on the big screen in a room or something like that. But what we've been talking a lot about with the prospect of this hybrid setup, where you're going to have some people in the office and some people remote, I would always, always, always advocate for everybody being in their own little box in the virtual conference, because I've been remote for 8 years, and I have to say my experience inside a company got much better when suddenly people weren't all in a conference room, but everybody's in their own little box, because I can see people's faces, I can read emotion, it's a whole different experience. So what we've done a lot of is, if we have one person remote, then we will always all be on camera, even if it's just there in front of us on the desk and everybody else is in the room. So I think it's that, if you've got somebody remote, then I would always use something like this.
Oh, we've just got a question there. Could you flip the thing up? There we go. Perfect. We've got another question from Lee. I think he's really on it with the presenting skills that he wants to learn at the moment. He's put, at what point does movement become too much movement, and can it cause a distraction? I also thought about this as well, as when is too many videos a thing?
Yeah, definitely. I think, 100% there is too much movement. That's really possible. I think, and it's hard to quantify it. I like to use things that are a lot more subtle, because actually our brains are incredibly fast at spotting what's moving in a piece of visual real estate. So I've done a lot of stuff with GIFs, because I quite like using GIFs, because it's a very easy way to bring humor to a presentation. But what I found is certain GIFs, if the GIF is like a really short GIF, so it loops really fast, it drives people insane. It's too much. So what I'm always looking for is slow movement and subtle movement. And I guess like the best test is if you look at it and you find yourself just looking at that thing that's moving for too long, then that's probably too much. But yeah, it's definitely a thing, and it's really hard to put a number or quantify it. I think it's just a gut feel.
So no running around the stage like a headless chicken then? Okay, we've got one last question here. It's from Joel. He says, I see your stand-in, Spencer. Do you find that helps with engagement, or is it a personal thing? I know you've touched on the fact that it helps with your confidence, but does it help with the engagement side of things as well?
For me, it's a number of things. Yeah, definitely confidence, definitely energy. It gives me a whole different energy. And also because when I'm using Prezi Video, I like to be able to move a little bit because, for example, like when I brought the spider on and I want to react to it, which is like a part of the experience that I want to give, then I want to be able to move easily. And if I'm sat down, that's not as easy to do at all. But for me, the big one is energy. I just feel like I have more energy and I give a better performance when I'm standing.
Fabulous. Well, I think that's it for now. That's great. Thank you very much for that. That was a great session, and I know that I've learned a lot by it. I know that Lee has learned a lot by it. See him at all the big events happening now. I'll become a public speaker after this. I've just got a few reminders now to let everyone know. So I just want to tell you that the competitions are running each day. All you have to do to enter is post a selfie on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever's your favourite platform, or picture of the event that you're watching, the session, or with your furry friends or your turtles or whatever you've got, snakes, spiders if you have them. They could win a £10 Pets at Home voucher. We have some commsHERO swag as per usual. We have these amazing daily planners, which I live by. This is already taken by Helen Little, so sorry everyone. And this, we've got 2 packs of Sharpies to be given out each day, and we also have Krispy Kreme donuts. We've got one's already been taken today. So we've got 4 more during the event, but in the after party event that's happening tonight, there you can win another 5 more vouchers, and the vouchers give you a free box of 12 Krispy Kreme donuts. And I know that they are Asif's favourites, so they've got to be good. So the commsHERO after party tonight is happening from 8 till 10, and there'll be performance by Graham Park. Yes, the man himself is joining us. There's going to be a magician there, Styler the magician, and we're also going to have a comedian there called Arthur Smith. So get your frocks on, make your favourite cocktails and mocktails, and get that fizz in the fridge chilling. We'll be giving, I've already mentioned the Krispy Kremes. But yeah, it'll just be a really good event to celebrate all the PR and comms professionals. We've all had a really tough year, or tough 18 months, should I say. So it'll be a really good evening. A huge thanks to Spencer for joining us, and for Prezi for sponsoring commsHERO Week. Our next session will be on at 3:15 with Brittany Barhyte and Chuck Goose talking all about how to achieve a happy workforce. For now, we have an hour in the social lounge, so everyone jump on the tables and make the most of that time to get networking with others. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.